Good morning, everyone. Can you guys hear me all right? We got the volume turned down a little from upstairs. I'll go ahead and get started. We only have 20 minutes, so I want to encourage anyone if there's questions. I'm going to hit a lot of different topics pretty quickly. We have a huge contingent from Palo Alto Networks over at our booth on the other side of the room. Come by and talk to us. There's a lot of things that we've got some great domain expertise and people here that are already deploying a lot of these things in the field that we can talk to you. So it's interesting, multi-domain, it's not only what you have to worry about in the enterprise, but it's also complicated by a lot of other factors. You've got these ad hoc networks, you've got potentially limited communications, you're dealing with new folks that you have to integrate with, and you're dealing with all the additional problems from an enterprise perspective. So whether that's trying to get efficiencies and dealing with this advanced cybersecurity threat, and also having to deal with the fragmented landscape. That means you have a lot of different tools, you're trying to get them to work together, you're trying to figure out how to make these tools talk to each other, how do you take the data and stitch it together so you're getting real mission intelligence out of those tools. It further complicates. We've done a couple of exercises recently and talking about certainly in multi-domain that outside of the IT network, you're also talking about critical infrastructure, you're talking about OT. There's a lot of things that are further complicating the traditional cyber risks that you have to focus on. I think that I'm going to focus on just a couple of these in the limited amount of time we have, and one of those is just visibility. As you go into these tactical environments, you go into a place that's maybe unfamiliar, you can't secure it if you can't see it. So having tools that have the ability to automate that visibility and to go in and using artificial intelligence, machine learning, not only be able to find what is out on the network, but to be able to identify how it should behave and be able to identify if there's anomalies or things that are happening with it that you're not expecting or you want to do other things with. And you have to have ideas on how to very effectively do segmentation of this ad hoc network, what things should go on. I think that the gut reaction from an IT perspective when there's any kind of a cyber event is to start turning things off. And when you're working with weapon systems, you're working with other things in a multi-domain environment, that's not appropriate. You have to have things segmented, and the way to do that efficiently and effectively is using artificial intelligence, it's using co-pilots, it's using best practices and giving real-time examples to your operators on what should be done, why it should be done, and how to do that very quickly, very efficiently, and very effectively. So really this means you have to move to a zero trust architecture irregardless of where you're at, how you're getting to it. Everything comes back to zero trust even when it's multi-domain. And that means you have to have artificial intelligence, you have to really look across the entire stack. And when I talk about zero trust, I usually talk about it from an ecosystem standpoint because multi-domain means you've now moved into an ecosystem that's much different than what you're familiar with. And when I say an ecosystem, it really means that all of those different piece parts are interrelated. You need to be able to correlate data. You need to be able to take that data and make efficient mission type of decisions with it. And it's critical that you're looking at that whole zero trust ecosystem in that all of those tools are working in concert and working well together. Palo Alto Networks has a very comprehensive set of tools that we go across. We play in every single pillar, all 7 pillars for zero trust, but we also collaborate very closely with a lot of the different partners in things like identity, things like content, places that you have to have that collaboration and that ecosystem. Again, zero trust all working in a multi-domain environment so that the tools all work effectively and efficiently together. And it's all becoming more and more sophisticated and the scale is improving. So these are the 3 things I usually focus on and what we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Scale, speed, and sophistication of attacks. The scale, I think we all know, there's a stat on here, 400% up in terms of cyber attacks. This is right out of what we see at the tip of the spear in the industry in terms of how many cyber attacks are happening. The sophistication of those, people are using artificial intelligence against us. and that really leads right back into the speed side. So from an operations perspective, you have a lot less time to react to a potential intrusion. We used to see attacks take from inception to exfiltration up to several weeks. That went down to several days. We're literally seeing attacks that are happening in a few hours from initial attack through exfiltration. Think about that in terms of a window, the opportunity you have to catch what's happening prior to, there's a whole different kind of can of worms once you get to exfiltration, right? So everything has to happen at machine speeds. It has to happen with automation. It has to happen with artificial intelligence, machine learning, and all of those, making your operators very efficient, very effective, and getting them the signal in terms of making cyber mission decisions very, very quickly in a very complex environment. If you look at this just from a complexity standpoint, just from a networking standpoint, this gets very quickly stovepiped. One of the first problems I talked about was this sprawl of different tools you have. Just from network, there's 13 different bubbles here that represent different features that you need. And a lot of times these have been rolled out as individual siloed applications. That's not how Palo Alto Networks addresses your cybersecurity. We want this to be a single platform. When we talk about a platform, we mean every single bubble here is a single pane of glass. It's a single place to put policy, and it's a single place to just upgrade features. So turn on features, don't turn on additional products, and you get that integration and that cohesiveness, and all those things are built in from the get-go. So it also means flexibility. So when I talk about things in a multi-domain environment, a lot of times I'm talking about virtual firewalls, or I'm talking about ruggedized firewalls, I'm talking about flexibility. You get the same user experience, you get the same capabilities, the same features, irregardless of how you deploy it. And again, single pane of glass, single unified policy, and flexibility in terms of how you want to deploy it. Just a quick plug in terms of this ever expanding. I showed you the 13 bubbles that make up network. That's changing already. I was out in Huntsville a couple weeks ago and talking to some of the folks there specifically around what they're going to do with their PKI infrastructure. PKI infrastructure is under attack. There's a lot of things that are happening right now. We just had an announcement last week from NIST with the current 3 standards that were finally adopted for NIST on what they're going to do with post-quantum cryptography. We've been supporting post-quantum cryptography in the box, in that one same solution, since May of last year. We support all of the standards that just came out from NIST. So it's just, again, it's an illustration of turn this feature on, it's free, it's in the box, it's included. Don't deploy additional stovepipes. Don't make it more complex than it has to be. Zero Trust Network Access. We have the only Zero Trust Network Access that is connected to the DODN through the BCAP. It has IL5 provisional accreditation. This is for a consistent security approach from wherever you are and from whatever you're doing. Again, come by. There's a lot of flexibility and things that are just now evolving with how we're doing this. Come by the booth. We're hitting a lot of different topics. Happy to go through those with you. This last slide here on just the visibility and the speed of these attacks, we can't anymore treat attacks as just looking at signatures, right? It has to be artificial intelligence. The only way to do it is to do inline, all of those tools in concert, single pass, doing inspection, single place to put policy, and we have right now 1.7 million zero-day attacks every single day. That means attacks we've never seen before. You think about that, if you've never seen the attack, you have to have artificial intelligence, you have to have very advanced capabilities to look at those attacks. That's what's built into the products, and that's what we're delivering today. And lastly, I'm just going to leave on this slide because I think it all comes down from an operations perspective. You've got a lot of telemetry coming in from a lot of different places. This really represents the 7 pillars of Zero Trust. How do you take this information from these disparate systems? How do you stitch it together and put it in the hands of your operators where they can make mission decisions based off of the signal of what's coming in, not the noise of all of the different logs, the different alerts. How do they get that in a place that it's actionable and they can do something with it? So I'll close this down. 20 minutes goes. Oh, I still have a little bit of time. So I think that when I look at our own SOC and we put this into action, what we've seen is that over the last 4 years, you just talk about the scale of what's happening. Our SOC internally at Palo Alto Networks in 2020, we saw 1 billion events a day. You think about that, that's a big number, 1 billion events every single day. Fast forward to where we are today, that number is now 59 billion events a day. That's exponential growth. That's the scale at what it's coming in at. The speed at what it's coming in at, we are seeing most of the events go to exfiltration within a period of hours. You don't have a few weeks to figure out what's coming in. So you need your network, you need your endpoints, you need your cloud, you need your applications, you need all of that telemetry coming in and being coalesced together. That means you need automation, you need orchestration, you need the data put in a place that it can be put together, stitched together in a way that it makes sense. And you need the ability for your operators to look at that information and instead of looking at 150 different alerts from 12 different sources, just say, this is what's actionable, this is what's happening, this is what you should do about it, and automate that. It's too often that our operators are looking at screens and looking at events, right? Events come through and they don't mean anything. You might have a new user that comes in, you might have a new device that comes in, you might get privilege escalation. These things happen dozens of times a day and no one pays attention to it because it's lost in that noise. But if you know that all of those events are correlated together and part of a single event, you absolutely want to turn that user off, right? That's an attack. If you have privilege escalation with a new user on a new device, you want that to happen automatically. You don't want your users trying, or your operators trying to figure out what is happening on the network. You want that mission type of intelligence that says, turn this off, do it automatically, and notify people what's going on. What that means is, at the end of the day, you have to drive efficiency for your operators, right? You can't scale. You think about 1 billion to 59 billion, you just can't hire enough operators to do something like that. You have to have a platform, which is what we deliver with Palo Alto Networks, that gives you those capabilities from a networking side, from a cloud side, from an operations side, and lastly, our incident response team. These are the tip of the spear, the type of folks that can be brought in like the SWAT team, whether you have an event or you're trying to prevent an event or you're looking at gaps, you want to do best practices. Palo Alto brings this comprehensive platform to you to address what you're doing and really taking and modernizing your cybersecurity operations. So there's a lot of things that we're doing today in multi-domain environments. Again, I recommend that you come by the booth. I wanted to leave a minute for questions, but these are things that we're actually doing, whether this is virtual firewalls that are deployed in the field, whether it's ruggedized firewalls that are deployed in the field, whether it's using our automation and orchestration engine that is sharing data in between disparate systems, whether it's that same tool doing automations so that you're reducing repetitive tasks for your operators, for your teams, whether it's to get rid of error-prone issues, whether it's giving best practices and looking at low-hanging fruit and giving that information very quickly to your operators. Whether it's doing endpoint, again, visibility is a huge piece of this. If you can't see what's out there, and when you're doing ad hoc networks, know exactly what you have to defend against. So the ability to go and turn that on and very quickly discover everything within the network. These are supporting DDoS environments, they're supporting weapon systems. There's a ton of applicability where you're taking what we learned in the enterprise and you're applying it out in the field, whether that's for 5G, whether it's for OT, all of these things play well together, and I wanted to let a little bit of time for questions, and I know we have a microphone in the back, so let me know if there's any questions for me or for the team. There's always some question.
Hi, good morning. So you mentioned post-quantum cryptography, and I'm just wondering, what does that look like now that we can't use the standard, like prime numbers and, some sort of exponent?
Yeah, so there's a few things, and I won't go too far into it, but so a lot of our PKI infrastructure is based on prime numbers. There's an algorithm called Shor's algorithm that is specifically designed to crack very large prime numbers. So we have foreign nations that are actively using Shor's algorithm, and they are developing quantum computers that will be fast enough to break our PKI infrastructure. So what we're doing, so NIST has put the standards together. There's also a couple agencies. We're involved with all the agencies in terms of helping develop the standards, and we're in all their beta programs. So within the firewalls, when you create a tunnel, we support all the standards from NIST. The first one's 8784, which is pre-shared keys. It's the ability to take a key that both sides know and understand, and to do a second pass on your PKI so that you're no longer based on a prime number. That's the first step in post-quantum cryptography, but it's not enough. There's a lot more that needs to be done. Last week, I think it was Monday or Tuesday last week, NIST announced the new cryptography standards. There's 3 cryptography standards that will be introduced to do what's called hybrid keys. So you could do your PKI, you could do your standard IKE v2 encryption. You could then do a second pass with 8784, which is pre-shared keys. You can do up to 7 now additional passes using any of the post-quantum cryptography that NIST has standardized on. You could do, there's additional PQCs, post-quantum cryptography, that's available, open source and others. You can do additional passes through that. You're now avoiding the problem with Shor's algorithm, and you're doing more sophisticated encryption so that if one of those keys gets cracked in the future, let's say one of them fails, you have the ability to, you still have it encrypted with other methods. So it gives you some flexibility in terms of how you're going to deploy it. Very modular. You can turn it on your firewalls today. If you own Palo Alto Network firewalls, you already own the ability to turn on post-quantum cryptography. You can start playing around with it. You can deploy it very quickly by, you can put it either as preferred or as mandatory. So if you're doing a handshake, the idea is if you've got many firewalls out there, you don't want to turn it on mandatory and start breaking things, right? You're going to start turning it on as preferred. If they both can speak post-quantum, you're going to do it, and eventually you'll start rolling that out through the network. Again, it's part of the platform. It's built in. It's not a new tool to manage. It's very simple to deploy. You already own it. It was free. It came out over a year ago with our products. And happy to go. If somebody wants to talk about post-quantum, we can do a deep dive back at the booth. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. I'm sorry I went a little fast in the beginning. I looked at the time incorrectly, so all good. Thank you.